Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to BiblioTech On Air. I'm Rosanna.
I'm Ruby.
And I'm Romeo.
And today we're going to be talking about our latest Libros and Libations pick, Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline.
Pretty good book. So for this book, for our listeners who maybe have read this book or at least know what it's about, obviously it dives a lot into what's called the Oasis, which is basically just like virtual reality or what you would see as a Vision Pro today. Apple Vision Pro, not sponsored.
Not an ad.
Yeah. So because of that, we wanted to actually, normally I come up with the questions myself. I'll kind of dive into reviews and come up with questions that way. But given the nature of what this book is, I wanted to, I asked ChatGPT for some, I put some prompts in there and asked for questions. So
you mean you don't use ChatGPT right on the regular?
No, I actually work very hard to come up with the questions. So if you guys that show up in person think they're good, great. If you don't, well, sorry. So,
I have thoughts, but I'm not going to talk about them.
I use ChatGPT for everything.
I think everybody does these days. So the two prompts I asked it, one is very basic. I just said, give me some book club questions for Ready Player 2 written by Ernest Cline, right? Simple. But to get more specific, I said, give me interesting book club questions about Ready Player 2 that highlight the game, music, and movie references, and also give me some questions that highlight the climax of the book. I wanted to be more specific. That way, I thought it generated some pretty good questions and it led to some pretty good discussion yesterday. So the only one question that I did not enter as part of ChatGPT was, how many of you watched Ready Player One movie and how many of you read the book and what your thoughts were compared to this one?
I watched the movie. I was a big fan of the movie. I did not read the book though, but the movie I think was a solid 8 out of 10.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw half the movie. I liked it. I thought the pacing was good.
Yeah.
And I mean, there was always something they were doing. So I'll give credit to that.
I was telling Carlos yesterday when we met in person to talk about this, that the one thing that I didn't like about the movie is right off the bat, the very first challenge is like, it's like a race, right? In vehicles. In the book, they actually play joust, which is a favorite of mine growing up. It's like, you're like on these ostriches, you knock off the head of the other rider and then you get their egg.
Oh, so you were looking forward to seeing that?
Yeah, but I guess a part of me is like, well, okay, how can they really pull that off? I mean, CGI can do a lot these days.
But I mean,
right?
they had King Kong
all the rights for every character. Oh my god!
Yeah,
that race
did.
is pretty epic.
It was. I know. Iron Giant at the end came out, and it was big for me. So, overall, though, right? I mean, I guess comparing the two, it's almost not fair. We can talk about the ending later, but just off the bat, I think we all pretty much agreed yesterday that, Ready Player One was just so much better.
Yeah,
I think Ready Player Two, for many reasons, just kind of fell flat in certain areas, especially in the beginning and the end. I think we talked about that. What did you guys think about how the book opened? And just as you went through it, what did you think? Initial thoughts?
It was, that intro portion was definitely tough to get through.
Yeah.
It
was like he was being really upsetting.
Yeah.
Parsival. It was just like, why are you've seen all the movies, you know how everything's gonna roll out if you end up using the ONI and you still choose to use it.
Yeah.
I was like, he was being so, I don't, he was pretty frustrating throughout this whole book, honestly.
Right. Like,
I was not a stand for him.
Honestly, like how many years passed in between everything? Like
3.
Yeah.
Oh,
so you would think that would be enough time for him to kind of, come to terms with all of that stuff.
With being
or at least most of it.
I mean, we talked about that too. So when the first book ended, they were 18 years old. Pretty much the group, the high five, were all the same age. When this one starts, they're 21, so it's 3 years later. But we talked about, I said, look, when I was 21, I wasn't making the best decisions. I thought I was responsible for the most part, but at 21, you're maturing, but you're not quite there. And I think it was obvious he made a lot of mistakes as a young adult.
That's true.
But I mean, like, his friend group seemed to handle it so much better, much more in stride. Like, they were still living their lives. They would hang out together without him. They, had so many charities and programs they were doing. And it seemed like Wade, he kind of had like programs that he was doing, but it was like an afterthought for him. Like, let me go ahead and like set up these organizations just so I don't look like, kind of the a-hole here.
That's true.
It didn't seem as sincere as like, with like H and Artemis and Shoto.
I think everybody had a significant other. I mean, I know Artemis didn't, but she was so busy trying to save the world that she didn't have time for it. And he was just a lonely, sour dude. He was zeroing out other players that would talk smack about him, like on message boards and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was pretty childish and stuff. But I guess in some ways throughout the book, he grew, but that's questionable too.
That whole book took over It took over a period of 12 hours.
Yeah.
How do you grow in those 12 hours?
How do you grow in those 12 hours?
It's very unrealistic in a lot of ways. Yeah, they had to find the 7 shards in 12 hours, and not only that, Artemis falls in love with him at the end too. Again,
no.
and it was like,
girl, no.
He didn't listen to you from the start, and
he's not
going to
listen to you in the future.
Exactly.
Like, come on.
And like this was a pretty big decision not to listen to someone about. It was the fate of humanity.
Exactly. Like straight up, what's his face? Anorak. Like
Anorak.
She's the only one
Yeah.
that was right about this, and y'all did not listen to her.
yeah. Did you see any logic to their arguments about why they should have it? Because there was one, I don't know, just thinking about it, they talked about how it could do a lot of good for those who are less fortunate.
Yeah, or
So-
like disabled.
Disabled.
Okay,
they
yeah.
can. So I kind of thought in some small aspect, I said, okay, I could see that argument, right?
Mhm.
That's a good table conversation for this group. But ultimately, I think like what Artemis was bringing up certainly outweighed what they were bringing up.
Right. Like, I mean, they already had the Oasis. Like, that was kind of,
And they had like stuff enough to be able to feel things, or like those bodysuits that
haptic
let
suits.
you. Yeah, I was like, is that not enough for y'all? I don't know.
like, it was giving very San Junipero from Black Friday. I mean,
Black
Black Mirror.
Mirror.
I said Black Friday from Black Mirror. You know, because they kind of had that going on too, where you can lose yourself in the, you know, like
Okay.
that alternate reality type thing.
Oh, okay.
And
I've
they,
not seen
they
that.
kind of alluded to that too, where it was like, you know, you have people who are hospitalized, you know, who just don't have good things, and they're able to kind of go in there and
Yeah, if somebody's in hospice care or something. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
that's a specific thing they have in there. Someone in
Yeah.
hospice.
I'm not saying that's like your dying wish necessarily, but I mean, if you're on your way out, I mean, might as well have a little fun and enjoy yourself. while you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
So I could see that. But other than that, yeah, definitely what ended up happening because
Yeah.
they didn't listen to her was like, okay, you should have just listened to Artemis.
Did they not watch
Honestly.
Wall-E?
That's exactly what I was thinking about
Wall-E.
too.
Save your planet.
Very true. So what do you think the attitude towards technology and artificial intelligence in particular in the novel is? What do you think, I guess the author's, you know, what he wanted to show the reader about technology and AI in particular?
I mean, I felt like we talked about this too, that the first book was definitely way ahead of its time.
Mhm.
Thinking just in that sense, like predicting like, oh, we're going to have these VR headsets and
Right.
we're going to be able to experience worlds beyond ours, things like that. So I thought, yeah, that first book was definitely way ahead of its time. And this one too, I can kind of see this one kind of happening in the future. I hope it doesn't happen anytime soon, but I don't know. Everyone's always trying to one up each other, like in the technology field.
Oh yeah,
You
you
know,
see that
like-
constantly with Apple,
Yeah.
Android, you know, Google.
Especially USA, just trying to make sure we get out there, get our name out there. But
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We so it reminded me of Nick and me. We went to Austin to the Apple headquarters in Austin, and we tried on the Vision Pros, and like I felt like we looked silly because the 3 gentlemen in there were helping us. They were just watching us, but as you're wearing these Vision Pros, I mean, you can still see what's in the room and everything. It's like spatial awareness and stuff, and like literally, I'm down here and I'm just doing this and I'm flicking things, and it's like a whole world. So it was like as close to what I imagined
Yeah.
this book being right now in 2024. I was like, wow, this book was, especially part 1 in 2011 when it came out, way ahead of its time. So
that's crazy.
I liked it. I thought it was, I mean, well, part 1, right? Definitely something to think about in terms of like, I don't know, are we going to go down that route in the future? You know, we're going to have to decide whether we're saving
I
humanity
mean-
or not in some way.
I think it's going to be inevitable. Like
Do you think so?
maybe if we could get a better handle on it, but I mean, you know, it's human nature to just
You
always...
can't trust AI. We
You-
just
well,
learned you can't trust.
That's not going to stop people. We also learned that does not
That
stop
does
people.
I tell everybody, like, have you never seen a Terminator movie? Have you seen
Exactly.
iRobot? Have you seen, I was telling you there's a new anime series on Netflix called Terminator Zero, and it's all about that. Like, basically just don't create those things.
Yeah.
Don't put them out into the world to take over. It's
Right.
it's
That's
crazy.
the premise. Even if people haven't, like, you know, Age of Ultron, you know, the Avengers, the AI got, you know, sentient, incredibly smart, wanted to
Mhm.
wipe out humanity. Like, there's so many storylines with that premise. Not just, you know, as story, but also as a warning. Like, be careful. People are not going to listen to that warning.
No, they're not. So,
They just want to have fun in this lifetime.
so shout out to local author Shay Serrano on whenever he, or on X now, whenever he tweets, I don't know what they call him on X now. I just call him tweets. Whenever he
Same.
tweets out something about technology that way, he always just says like, someone please watch a movie.
Yeah.
Please, like, just don't do it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I'm like, exactly, just don't do it. So how does the novel address themes of reality versus escapism? In what ways do the virtual and real worlds impact the characters' perceptions and actions?
I thought it was crazy to me how Parsifal would continually say like how in the Oasis he was like popular, had a bunch of friends, had like really great relationships and things like that. But in the real world, he didn't have any of that.
Right. He was pretty miserable.
I was like, why? Like, what's the difference?
You have now in this you have all this money. You have access to the whole real world. Like, bro, go travel.
Like, you have the chance to and just immerse yourself in the real world, like beyond what you had in the past. Because like he was poor, so obviously the only thing he had to look forward to was the Oasis. But I don't know. Now he has all this money, he can travel and see things, but he chooses not to.
Yeah.
What do you think about those that are, they experience loneliness in different ways and they're not as socially, maybe they're a little socially awkward in some ways. They don't make friends easily, right? So what do you think about, escaping into the Oasis for people like that versus somebody who can just go and make friends out in the real world super easy? Like it's not like that for others. So what do you think about that?
I mean, I guess I can kind of see it. Like you're in this virtual world, so it feels like it's not you, It feels like it's just someone else. You're able to portray yourself a certain way. It's not as serious as the real world.
Right.
But then it just brings up the question, like, are these like relationships as deep,
are they
as
sincere?
Real and sincere? Yeah. Can you trust people that you meet in these virtual worlds?
Right. Because for him, luckily it worked out. He had like a whole gang of like ride or die.
Yeah.
But
not everyone is who they say they are.
Exactly. Like they always tell, well, it doesn't apply to him because he's rich now and stuff.
Yeah.
But, be careful who you talk to. It could be a predator. It could be, a 53-year-old man. You could be getting catfished. You never know who it is.
I think the lines for him of fiction and reality were blurred. Like I think initially it might have been like, okay, like you mentioned, I was impoverished growing up, and Wade saying that, right? Yeah. He was impoverished growing up, and I'm trying to escape my like life of destitute and everything. But now that he has money, it's like I think for him it's more about just it's just always who he was. That kind of person that couldn't really live in the real world and accept who he really was. And like I said, the lines just got blurred for him, and it was like, I basically live in the Oasis. That's his thing.
But I mean, you could bring up the argument for the other side too. Like now that he has money and he's famous, who's to say that any relationship that he forms in the real world is that going to be sincere too? So
good point.
That could.
Is it genuine, or am I just hanging with you because you're a multi-billionaire?
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's true. I didn't think about it like that, but yeah. So Ready Player 1 and 2 are usually considered as holy grails of pop culture by many nerds and book lovers out there. How does the book use pop culture references and nostalgia? Do you think these elements enhance or detract from the story?
I'm an avid fan of nostalgia. So this book has heavily nostalgia.
Yeah.
I felt like Ernest Cline like knew the 80s. I mean, we did the timeline. He was a teen in the 80s, right? So it seems like this was like his prime, was just in being so involved in everything 80s, the music, the games, everything like that.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the references were cool, but in my opinion, they did get a little
too much.
It felt like it was just thrown in for,
Sure. For the sake of just
for the sake of it.
I think it's because part 1 was so littered with it, and it was like, I mean, nobody had really made a book like that or written a book like that where it was like, holy crap, this is legit. Like everybody who grew up in that time was like, oh my God, it's amazing. But part 2 felt very forced.
Yeah,
exactly.
Just trying to recreate part 1, and some made sense. Like there's a fight scene where they were, with Prince and stuff. But other than that, a lot of it was kind of like, okay,
oversaturated.
Yeah, like big ones like that where it was just like, that was the whole premise of like that scene or that act in the book. Like that's cool.
Yeah,
but constantly just little ones, even like in the midst of
the John Hughes universe.
That was interesting. That was pretty interesting. But yeah, just like little ones for the sake of it, like they're having a serious conversation and like, oh my God, this is just like that one moment in
this movie or whatever.
I think my age is showing, but yesterday when your friend Mike was there and he said like, yeah, I've only seen like one John Hughes film. I was like, what? Like you've not seen all of them?
I've seen all of them. I like John Hughes. But I don't know if I liked the references in the book. I was like, I didn't think Andy should have ended up with Ducky from Pretty in Pink, but
yeah, that's true. Well, they even make mention in this book how it was very John Hughes movies lacked a lot of color, a lot of actors of color, actors and actresses.
That's a whole different topic.
And it was very suburban Chicago most of the time, and it was
middle white class.
Yeah, but I mean. Being respectful of the time, it was in the 80s. Hollywood at that time, right? There's a lack of diversity now, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of like that he touched on that because he could clearly see it when he's talking about John Hughes and talks about all the different characters from the movies. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Do you think the 80s was the best era? No, I was like,
No.
I feel like so many people that grew up in the 80s are just like so hard, like ride to die
The
for the
80s
80s.
were the time.
Yeah, the best times
the
of the life.
music, the fashion.
I'm not a huge fan of like hair metal. So that's why
Okay.
80s for me is not my
Is that
thing.
like when you think of 80s? Is that like what
For
comes
me,
to
yeah.
mind?
That's what
for
I
you?
would
Like
I mean,
hair
too.
metal?
there were some great pop songs that came
Yeah.
out in the 80s. I do have like a whole playlist on Spotify
Mhm.
for 80s pop, but like a lot of the hair metal for me, I'm just like, it's not my thing.
Okay, greatest era. Do you think it's 90s?
90s for me.
Okay, I had that feeling.
But I was born in the 80s, I'm raised in the 90s, so
Okay.
it makes sense.
That makes
I'm
sense.
biased, right? So I don't know what y'all think.
I mean, VH1's I Love the 90s was probably better. So I'm going to go with the 90s.
The 90s?
The 90s was a pretty great time to be a baby in.
Wait,
We were the Nickelodeon kids.
Yeah.
we
it
were.
was.
It was in the 90s where like obviously the technology was booming and it was around, but it's like they say it was before the .com thing. I think internet went live in like 92 or like the www
Yeah.
went live like in 92 and I remember, using my cousin's computer to chat on AIM and stuff, but
Mhm.
the generation that I'm from, it's like pre-big tech,
Yeah.
but also like, young enough to still understand and get
Yeah.
the tech.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's why I said I'm biased, but for me, I'm always like, man, the 90s is just like, it was good.
Like maybe it would have been cool if like Ready Player 2 like did that. Like instead of still focusing heavily on the 80s, maybe if they had like jumped to the 90s,
I
that
would
would
have
have been kind of
expected
like
that.
cool.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. I didn't think about that. Yeah, maybe. But I guess like you mentioned, I mean, we looked at when he was born, Ernest Cline,
Yeah.
real
Right.
life, and I guess it just made sense for him to be like, well, this is what I know. And
This is the best era.
people
and-
typically say, write what you know, and in his case, that's what it was. So,
Mhm.
It was too much.
but that
It
would have
was
been
too
good.
much.
That would have been good. So
He didn't get to experience Nirvana.
true.
The grunge era.
The grunge.
Oh
era.
man, that era. So how does the book use music references to deepen the reader's understanding of the characters or the setting? And can you think of specific examples where music played a key role?
Prince.
Prince.
Did you like-
British.
Did you like that scene?
Oh yeah, the Prince thing. It was so.
It was
so
cool.
cool.
I
was-
liked the purpleness.
it.
All
Yeah.
the purple, all the glamour. I felt the glamour.
And then
through
the
book.
reference to like of course like different movies, his
Yeah.
different time periods.
I liked he had different types of princes as well, right?
Yeah.
Like 9 different types of princes.
I think it was like the growth of Prince as a person, though,
Mhm.
and obviously artistically as a musician, it was kind of like his Purple Rain era, and then
Mhm.
like his pre-Purple Rain era, and then
Mhm.
like a little bit later in life when he's a little bit more into his religion and stuff. And
Mhm.
I thought that was kind of interesting. He had that take, just kind of like different stages, different
Yeah.
people you got to battle.
Like they even mentioned like the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
like
that's
that,
right.
Which is no argument here. Best Super Bowl show ever.
That was a great show.
Prince
It was
Super Bowl
pretty good.
halftime show. Starts raining when it's singing Purple Rain.
Oh, yeah,
You just
that was
can't
cool.
get
That's-
better
you
than
can't-
that.
One of my favorite performances by him is when this was back like in 2008 or 9, maybe 10. Rolling Stone magazine had just put out their top like 50 greatest guitarists or something like that,
Oh,
and they
yeah.
snubbed him.
Yeah.
That's right.
And then so the performance he had
pettiness.
after that,
Yes.
he just went off.
Pettiness.
They covered
Yeah.
the Beatles song "While My Guitar Gently Weeps," and it
He
was
just-
Eric Clapton. I
Yeah.
don't know who else, and he just shreds. And then every list after that,
Yeah.
he was on it, and I was like, "Damn,
As
that guy,
he should be.
He should have
My
been.
As he
goodness.
should.
amazing!" I thought that was really good. So what about the movie references in Ready Player 2? Can you discuss how they reflect the themes of the book, or are there any particular films that you think are most relevant to the story's message? I know we talked a lot about John Hughes.
Right, because that's kind of like the go-to teenage movies,
Mhm.
nostalgia, you
Yeah.
know, like coming of age. And it seemed like in a way, like we mentioned, they're 21, but it's still like they're still growing up. So I think it was pretty fitting that the John Hughes was a big reference for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so too.
I think so too. I think it set the tone for the whole movie. I mean, they're around the same age, right?
Mhm.
These are like high school kids. They're 21. They were 18 when they won the competition in Ready Player One. I do feel like I wanted him to go into other 80s movies and not just rely heavily on John Hughes. There were so
Mhm.
many other great movies, other great directors at that time. He does allude to a few others, but I think he talks about Rain Man. I think it was one with Tom
Mhm.
Cruise.
Yeah.
And, I mean, great films, but I feel like he was lacking a little bit in the movie
Mhm.
department versus some of the music references and gaming
Yeah.
references. So
He could have popped off.
he could have. I think it was a solid opportunity to just go movie mode.
Yeah.
Could have had some Lost Boys,
Oh man.
I tell
I love
everybody
Lost
the Lost Boys is. I mean, I know Interview with the Vampire and Twilight and stuff, but greatest vampire movie for
No,
me
it's
is Lost Boys. I love it. Is there a better one for you?
I mean, the Gary Oldman Dracula, that's pretty high up there for me.
Pretty good too.
But, I
know.
mean, Lost Boys, you got to respect it. Like, absolutely. It's like maybe top 5.
I mean, Teen Vampire is just like, I don't know. It was a
Wrecking
good,
stuff.
Wrecking
good
stuff.
soundtrack. It was
It was
really
a
good.
really good soundtrack.
Yeah.
Really good. Were there any pop culture references you didn't understand or found confusing? And how did this affect your experience of the book?
Some of those incredibly like
The
niche games.
Yeah, I did not like the Princess Ninja game.
Yeah,
I was like, okay, I guess that existed.
Yeah, it was, I think Carlos asked yesterday if that was a real game. And I looked into it a little bit, like how I think in Japan, when they released that game, it was a female protagonist, right? But in the United States, they felt like marketing wasn't there for young women.
They didn't like females at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a whole nother discussion we can
have
into.
a separate episode on that. But pretty much that's what they alluded to. And like, so here they decided to change it to a male lead. And like I was mentioning, here in American games, there's always like a damsel in distress. You're saving the woman. And it's like, it was kind of cheesy, but I didn't understand some of the gaming references, some of the computer technology he mentions. He goes deep into it. I don't even know if that's real.
Info dumpy up at some points with that info dumpy.
It was just like he was acronym soup, alphabet soup. It was like A3000 ZB.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? Like, is that real? And I didn't even bother to look at that stuff.
Did you just call me something?
I know. I was like, what did you say? It was pretty good. Speaking of okay, so we talked about, it's not a question I had, but nobody seemed to know who the narrator was except me. And it's Will Wheaton. Has nobody seen Stand By Me?
Oh.
The Rob Reiner film?
Yeah. Well, in the beginning of the audiobook, he's like, oh, it's read by Will Wheaton.
Will Wheaton.
I discovered Will Wheaton from, I think it was The Big Bang Theory.
Yes.
Like he made some appearances.
He did.
And then from there, I was like, oh yeah, he was in like Stand By Me.
Yes.
Like
he was like
did not know that.
Star Trek too, right?
Star Trek as well. Yeah. So I was like, no. And then everybody's like, I have no idea who that is. And I was like, wow. I was like, okay, cool.
Like definitely not by name. Like if you bring up Stand By Me, then it's like, oh, okay. But like by name.
Yeah. Because him and River Phoenix in that one were good. They're the best friends in that one. And it was a good movie. But anyways, I felt old when I asked everybody if they knew who he was. But we talked about this briefly. So the movie literally takes place in like 12, 13 hours. But how do the main characters, particularly Wade or Parzival and Artemis, evolve throughout Ready Player 2?
Oh my God.
Do you think their growth is believable and satisfying?
No, we talked about this. Like, girl.
I don't know.
No.
He was, I don't know. I got creeper vibes from him in this book. Like he
absolutely.
Like it was over for him and Artemis, and then he would like they would be in this serious challenge or thinking in something, and he's like, she looks so beautiful the way she used to. I was like, oh my God, come on.
I mean, I hate to say this, but like you can kind of understand because that's been like his one girlfriend, his one love. So it's like, okay, he's not gonna get over her immediately.
He's obsessed, yeah.
But like with that said,
for her to get stunk or like snuck back in there with him.
Yeah, it's just like, no, girl, that's a red flag.
Yeah, no bias for me. I was like, this guy's creepy.
He's creepy.
I was reading it and I was like, at first, like you said, I was like, okay, well, he's got a crush. And then I'm like, this is pretty obsessive. Bro.
Yeah, because I mean,
it was very...
we kind of mentioned this last night. Like, if you had the robes of Anorak and you had the opportunity to like go jump on people,
eavesdrop, yeah.
Like, I don't think I would do it with strangers or people I didn't know. Like, I would probably go to my friends and be like, hey, I'm here. Like, but I wouldn't like go.
But I think that speaks to his loneliness, like we're talking about. He really didn't have real friends.
True, like he was craving those connections.
He was craving a connection, and of course, I'm not saying it's okay. We don't condone that kind of stuff, right? But like he eavesdropped because I think he was trying to feel as a part of something in some weird way, and it was creepy. But I don't know if I do that either. But at the same time, like I put it to everybody yesterday, like if you really had the robes of Anorak,
and
you were the only one in the world, you were unstoppable. Would you do something? Everybody was kind of like, well. If you put it that way, maybe.
Like, I could justify it, like, kind of how it was used for the plot. Like, finding out, like, okay, this is what the people are up to. Like, we got to jump on them. Like, for that or for, like, to combat nefarious purposes.
Sure.
Yeah.
But.
Like, as needed.
Exactly.
You bust them out, right?
As needed.
I mean, if someone said something about your mom, would you zero them out?
I'm the only one that gets to talk smack about my mom.
Exactly. So that you would zero them out.
Y'all leave my mother out of this. She might have yelled at you in the grocery store.
You know how people talk online to each other when they're playing games?
Oh, it's horrible.
Oh, man. Yeah, you got to be careful. I monitor my son when he plays games, and I look at him if he says something weird, and I'm like,
if he says something weird,
he's like, oh, sorry.
Right. It's like, excuse me, who taught you that?
Yeah, it's like, we don't talk like that here. Yeah, it's pretty. I'm like, come on, dude. But speaking of as needed, like, he always justified what he did in the book. Did you realize that? He's like, I know this is wrong and I shouldn't be doing this. And I've told myself this many times, but I'm doing it anyway.
Yeah.
He never really owned up to the...
He didn't.
He didn't take responsibility.
He never did. I know he apologized to Artemis, but it was like, it was just kind of like, I still love you.
It was a forced YouTuber like apology video with
ukulele.
the ukulele.
pretty much.
Discount code in the comments.
Yeah, I agree. How does Cline, the author, Ernest Cline, envision the future in Ready Player 2? Do you find his vision optimistic or pessimistic, and why?
That's a good one.
It's hard. It's a difficult question to answer, I think. But just thinking about, obviously it's a fictional book, but these thoughts, I think about it this way. These thoughts and pen to paper comes from somewhere. I'm not saying he's a weird dude or anything, but like, I think he has a vision for what technology is or what it could be and maybe how it's good and how it's also bad.
Right. Realistically, like he sees both outcomes, like, the good in it versus the bad in it.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it kind of plays out more towards the bad side in the novel, but I think if we're going based off of what he thinks, he sees both. He sees the perks and the pros and cons.
Yeah. Do you think it's like a cautionary tale, like for anybody else in the future? Like we're talking about already, like don't do it.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I mean, why would you give your brain total control give total control of your brain to something?
Yeah,
that's a little crazy. I think Ernest Cline would be a big fan of Black Mirror.
Oh,
he isn't already.
He probably already seen it. Yeah, I wonder. I was telling him yesterday that Ernest Cline is like one of like, I mean, don't quote me, you can look it up, but I think he's like one of like a handful of people that have like a decked out DeLorean, like the one from the 85 Back to the Future.
Oh, wow.
So he's like prideful with that.
Yeah.
And he lives in Austin. We talked about it, right? So I don't know. But I think about that, like as an author, people can judge you all and be like, well, it's fiction, right? It's fiction. But sometimes I'm like, these ideas come from somewhere, whether it's trauma from when you're a childhood or you're a teen or whatever, or I don't know, you just have a very creative mind like this book. But sometimes I'm really like, I don't know. I just think like this has to come from somewhere. Like he was clearly into movies and games and like, but then some of this other creepy stuff was like, was that you as a kid, dude?
Yeah, the creep. True. I mean, it's the good thing is like he seemed to take like he learned lessons from those. He's self-aware. He's self-aware. He learned lessons from those. Yeah. Put it into a book, kind of like y'all be careful.
Yeah, be careful. Treat this as the future of the Bible, or the Bible of the future.
Also, shout out to Rush and Prince,
There you go. There you go.
I just want flying cars in the future.
I know, right? I will say though, in 80s and 90s, every like TV episode had like a nice message. Boy Meets World growing up, I would always watch that and it's like, okay, they're fighting, blah, but then they come to an agreement. There's a message at the end, right? And you don't see that anymore. It's like how to be an influencer and let's get rich and let's do, it's just, I don't know.
It's rare. It's rare when you see it. And sometimes when you do see it, it's kind of like, pooped on because people are like, oh, like, why do we need to know? It's like, no, these are essential things. We grew up with these lessons. Go
smell grass.
Yeah.
Go touch grass.
No, go smell grass. You need to be beyond touching grass. Go smell grass.
Go smother yourself.
Go roll around in it. That's what my son tells his friends when he's going to take a break. All right, bro, I'm going to go outside and touch some grass.
Honestly, sometimes, after you read a hard book or like, heavy TV show moment, video game, you're just like, I need to be one with nature.
Yeah, you do. So what did you think of the final showdown in Ready Player 2? How did the stakes and the resolution compare to the climax of the first book? We talked about that, the battle between Anorak and Og. I mean, what are your thoughts? What did you think about that? And then compare it to the ending in book 1. Well, you didn't finish book 1, right?
No, I saw the notes.
The huge war, the nuke and everything, right? Okay, so what did you think?
I would have liked if they pushed that big red button in this book.
It seems like the stakes were just kind of like already, it overall, like, there were dire stakes, but when it came down to the battle itself, it was like,
I'm like, forgive me, I had 30 minutes left in the book. Does it kind of just like, everyone just goes on their separate ways and like that's it? They continue just living in the oasis?
Leave the planet.
Pretty much.
The ship.
Like, they're like, they have their minds like basically duplicated into like these AI versions of themselves, and those versions fly off into wherever they go, and then the real them stays behind. But it's almost like, okay, well, the world sucks, and
that's crazy.
Right, whatever. It was kind of weird.
I do not
like the red button was just kind of like It's there. It didn't seem as threatening as it's,
Yeah,
you
like
know,
we
when
mentioned
they introduced
yesterday,
it.
like we would have liked to see him push the red button.
Or even Samantha run and be like,
everyone get out from the Oasis and be like, oh, I don't know, take a look around.
the world is as terrible as I remember it.
Maybe we should do something about this.
Do you think he had the courage to actually push it? Because that meant the end of his time in the Oasis. I didn't think so either.
If anyone was going to push it, it was going to be Artemis.
Yeah.
100%. Like, he was not.
And the crazy thing is, though, is he's the only one allowed in the area where the red button is at. So, because he had the robes of Anorak back at that point. So it's like this castle or whatever. And the red button's in there. Nobody else is allowed to enter. So literally, it was up to him.
Yeah.
And I don't think he would have done it either. He was trying to.
Yeah, no. But like, what I didn't understand is where he was like, if I push the red button, like humanity would just go into chaos. I was like, would it really? I don't know. Like, I mean, yeah, everyone would be like, oh man, that stinks. Like, this is gone. But I don't know.
Because their internet would still be around. It's not like you're shutting down the internet, right? Like, it was a button to shut down the Oasis. Specifically.
Correct.
So, like, who's to say something else wouldn't?
Do you think humanity can't live without internet?
At this point, no. At this point, no. Now, let's say in about 1,000 years when, you know, nature has taken back control of the earth and then, you know, humanity
Skynet
is like,
strikes. Yeah.
When the crab people just...
Yeah. Then, you know, we'll readapt.
Here's what I think. I'm like, okay, you should have just pushed the button in the beginning, ended it, and they still had other engineers and stuff.
The book would have been like that big.
Yeah.
I was like, we would have had no plot.
But they still had all their O&I engineers. They would have been like, all right, let's just rebuild this thing. Like, maybe it wouldn't have been to the full specs of what Halliday had it, but I mean, it would have been there. I think it was kind of like...
yeah, I mean, Halliday, I feel like Halliday didn't release it for a reason. Yeah. He was like, I'm not going to put this on me.
He's straight up like, yo, this is Pandora's box.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm going to let someone else
Just give it to a 21-year-old. That makes a lot of sense. He'll figure it out.
That's the thing, too. Like, when you think about your heir or whatever, like, maybe you should have put a stipulation, like, if they are not, like, at least 25 by the time they win the contest.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and...
put an age cap. Put
exactly.
An age minimum.
Like, have them learn, gain experience.
Maybe do some courses online before you give him...
At LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Or do the whole Marvel thing. You have to be worthy of lifting up Thor's hammer. Like, if you're not worthy, you can't pick it up, right? So if you're not worthy, you don't take over.
I mean, he did the challenges.
Well, I was going to say, I'm like, the challenges were kind of
to test your worthiness. But I mean, the challenges were just kind of to test, like, how big of a Halliday nerd you were.
That's true.
If you knew everything about him.
Too.
Yeah, that's true. So, I mean, we pretty much answered this, but the last question I had is, you know, did the ending feel satisfying to you? Why or why not? I mean, I think the consensus is like, not really, right?
No.
What did you think? I mean, I don't want to put too much thought into this, but do you think, I guess, how do you think it could have ended that would have made it better? Just pushing the red button?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Push the red button, release everyone from the nightmare of the Oasis.
Kill Anorak.
Yeah.
And then done.
And then just go water some plants. Go water some grass.
Go touch some grass again.
Or like maybe focus on rebuilding the world.
Yeah.
Like, honestly.
That's true.
Pull a Wally. Have a little plant that gives you some hope.
Just turn this book into Wally at that point. It's Wally now, not Ready Player 2.
Wally 2.0.
It would have been cool, like, you know, have Anorak win, like about to take control of everything, like, you know, shutting down servers, being like, y'all can't leave, and then Wade just being like,
boom, done.
Mm-hmm.
Just like an EMP.
Yeah.
Dead.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that would have been good.
Like an EMP. That's cool.
Somebody needs to write books where the bad people win.
Yeah. Well,
there's a couple like that. We just probably haven't thrown them into our
book club recs.
Yeah. We need to get in that. I don't know if I'm mentally stable enough for that.
I don't think the villains are mentally stable, so that's already common ground.
Can you, so just to finalize the discussion of this book, what are you currently reading right now, other than what you just finished with Ready Player 2, just so our listeners can hear what you're reading as a rec?
I'm going to start reading Severance for our next book club pick.
True.
Severance by Ling Ma.
Get ahead on that, not wait till the weekend before Libros.
That's tradition.
That's what I keep doing. So as soon as I finish here, I'm going to go start Severance.
Good deal.
She started it right now. Like, don't you see?
She's like checking it out as we speak right here. What about you, Rizal?
I just got done reading Celestial Monsters by Aidan Thomas. It's the conclusion to a duology, the first book being the Sunbearer Trials. Shout out to Haley. She had that smack available the day it came out, which was last Tuesday, and I knocked it out in like a day and a half. So I was like, yeah.
And you returned it for others to enjoy?
Oh, I did. My friend checked it out right after me.
Nice.
So now I'm like kind of, okay, what am I going to read now, you know?
Good deal. Yeah. I just finished. So I started Severance by Ling Ma also. I'm doing the audiobook about 2 hours in. I just finished a book called In My Time of Dying by Sebastian Younger. He was a war correspondent at the time. Near-death experience, long story short, his perspective on the fear of death changed, and how humans, he argues, shouldn't fear death the way we do. Because back in the day, you think about, you see it in movies a lot, and you read it in like old texts and stuff, like they talk about death being like an honorable thing, right? But as medicine and science evolved, it was kind of like, you should fear it. You should be scared because there are procedures that could essentially save your life.
Yeah.
But when it's your time, right? I mean, nobody wants to die when they're 10 or 20. I'm not saying that either, but his argument is just like, it shouldn't be as fearful as like we always put it out there to be. Like, sometimes you accept your fate, basically.
That's interesting.
I feel like we're kind of going back to that, because maybe like, now today's generation, like, millennials, Gen Z and stuff, we're usually like, well, I'm ready to die today.
That's true. But are they really?
That's
when
the thing.
It comes
it's like,
down to it.
I don't know. We're getting off top, but I don't know if I'm like ready.
I was going to ask you, so now that you read it, are you ready to die?
I don't think I'm ready, but I will say that like a little bit of a perspective shift, like thinking about it in the way he tells it, I was like, okay, I could totally see that. Like, I mean, if it was my time, I'd still be afraid, but also being like, well,
this is it.
This is it. Like, what else can you do?
Yeah.
Right.
What else can you do?
Because there's no way you're going to be ready to die. Like, as prepared as you are, like you still have your, or as welcoming of it as you might be, you still got to be like, okay, well, I have things at home that I need to make sure get looked after before I die. Sure. I have internet histories that need to be deleted.
That need to be cleared.
There's a lot of things that, so I don't think you're ever going to be really, truly ready for death.
I mean, like at Ready Player 2, they wanted their minds to live on.
I know. That's weird.
But again, make sure y'all check it out on cloudLibrary. We have both the audiobook and the ebook. Correct. Again, Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. We also have the first one if you want to go ahead and give that, a whirl. So...
And check the movie out.
I'm
not going to lie. I didn't check to see if it was on Hoopla or something, but it might be. Or on Canopy.
Maybe. If not, maybe we could get it at some
point.
But, stay tuned for that. Our next book is going to be Severance by Ling Ma. That's also available on cloudLibrary, I believe.
Correct.
And that's going to be next month, again, at Burleson. What is the date for that?
It's the first Monday of October. Don't quote me. I'm not certain. But it's the first Monday of October. We'll be meeting at 6 p.m.
Cool beans. Well, with that said, let's go ahead and end this episode. Thanks for joining, y'all. Once again, I'm Rosanna.
I'm Ruby.
And I'm Romeo.
We'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks.